Hey, welcome to my channel. In this video, we're going to be talking about how hackers think, and really kind of the purpose of this video is to help you discover your own methodology whenever you come across a web application or some kind of CTF or maybe a penetration test in the future. How can you come up with a methodology that is going to work for you in actually attacking different systems? And also, this is going to be geared towards beginners. So like if you're just starting out, how can you develop a thought process and a methodology that you can use as a penetration tester or a bug bounty hunter throughout your career and in the future? So this is kind of going to be a guideline to get you started. So I've gone ahead and created a slideshow here for us. So we just have the basic hacking is hard, which is going to be really true, especially if you're a beginner. It's going to be really hard. It's going to feel different than anything you have learned in the past. And the reason is because usually when you learn things, especially if you've gone through elementary school and high school, everything happens in a progression. You start with addition, and then you go to subtraction, and then multiplication, then division, and then you go to geometry. You have this progression. It's not all dumped on you all at once. And in the world of cybersecurity, when you start out, everything is going to seem incredibly difficult because I have this little image here I have used in the past. When you start out, everything is new, and there is so much information that you're just going to have this gigantic learning curve right here, and it's just going to feel like you're never going to get it, and it's an endless ocean of information, and it is hard. And it's going to be different than anything you have learned in the past because to my knowledge, there isn't really any great way to break this up. It's okay, let's learn networking, and you start at the beginning of networking, and then networking is boring. So you say, I want to start looking at web applications. Well, you need to know a little bit about how protocols work in order to start attacking websites. And then when you start looking at websites, you have to learn how to use burp, and that can be really confusing. There's a lot of information. You've never heard what a proxy is, and it can just be really hard, and the learning curve is super steep. So if you want to attack something in any way, shape, or form, there's kind of a lot of stuff you have to know. Even the basic stuff can be difficult. One thing that is really common for beginners is to say, I'm going to learn cross-site scripting. Well, in that case, you need to know how HTML tags work and how you can break out of them. So it can be really, really hard, and it's going to be different than anything you've learned in the past. And moving on, there are different coding languages, and this is a big problem that seems to happen within the world of cybersecurity. Is if you want to be in cybersecurity, you have to know how to code. And I would say you don't even need to know how to code proficiently. You really just need to be able to understand and read different types of code so you know what is happening. And when you start thinking, I need to learn how to code, if you've ever thought, okay, I want to learn how to code, and you look at a text editor for the first time and you see a bunch of code, you're going to think, this is impossible. I have no idea what is going on. But just saying, every programming language was meant to be readable by humans and computers. So it is possible to learn, but you don't need to learn it in any kind of depth. So what happens in the beginning is a lot of people will go, okay, well, I need to learn some kind of coding language or programming language, and then they see a bunch of languages and it just becomes overwhelming. But really, you just need to learn something basic like Python, and then once you know how the flow of programming works, you'll be able to read code pretty easily. And ChatGPT can also be your friend, and you can just paste code in there and say, explain this, and it will do that. So learning different coding languages, I don't think should overwhelm you, but it is something that will benefit you in the future. Next up, setting up an environment. So as we're talking about hacking is hard and different things that are going to scare you off in the beginning, when you hear of setting up your environment, there's actually a comment on one of my videos that kind of made me laugh. Somebody said they didn't make it even 3 minutes past setting up their virtual environment because it was too hard. And I was thinking, yes, setting up your virtual environment can be scary if it's your first time, you don't really know what you're doing. If you are a beginner and you never have set up a virtual environment and you have no idea what Linux is or how to use a command line or a terminal, then it can be a little bit scary. And what happens is you just get scared off. And you hear scary new words on YouTube videos. So we've talked about, I've probably already used some terminology that is specific to cybersecurity, and it can be scary. And so what happens is a lot of beginners just quit. So I have that here. Most beginners fail. Most beginners just say, you know what, this is too hard. There's too much information. And I'm just going to tell you, when I first started out, I downloaded the Webster Dictionary on my phone because I would print off different articles, or I bought different books that I could be reading, and then I didn't know what the terminology was. I had to look things up. I remember my first day in college sitting down on my apartment floor and opening up a book that I had never read. I had no idea what it was about, and I remember probably on the first page having to look up 4 different words and thinking, this is crazy hard I'm never going to be able to figure this out, but you do eventually learn it. So don't let the YouTube scare you off, or how to set up an environment, or the jargon or the terminology be too scary. Or even if you look at a terminal or you see a command line or some text editor with some code, just know you're going to get there eventually. And to remember that this little learning curve right here really is super steep, and you will eventually reach this point up here where it's okay, you've learned a bunch of stuff, and now what you're learning, and now your progression of learning is very slow. It's not going to be all that often that you're running into a bunch of stuff that's scary, or you really don't understand or have no idea what's going on. I mean, it still happens. I run into stuff that I don't know what's going on, and I have to do a lot of research to figure it out. But not everything is going to be new at this point once you're a couple years in. Once you are right here, first day, first week, first month, there's so much new information. Don't let it scare you off. And most beginners fail, I think, because they just think this is too hard, and therefore they just quit. Along with this, one of my last points is it is very easy to get bad advice. My very first thing I did in cybersecurity, remembering I know nothing at this point. I am brand new and I am looking for advice. I have a friend whose brother-in-law worked at a cybersecurity company. I asked for his phone number. I called him and I said, hey, I want to be in cybersecurity. I want to be a penetration tester. What do I need to do? And he said, sign up for the OSCP and you'll be fine. And I said, there's 3 options, a 30-day, a 60-day, and a 90-day, which I think they don't even do anymore. And he said, sign up for the 60-day, study for 4 hours a day, and you'll be good to go. And I remember thinking, okay, this is great. Must not be that hard. I signed up having never set up an environment right here. I have never set up an environment. I knew a little bit of programming, so I figured, I've kind of got like some kind of head start. And I remember signing up for the OSCP and the 60 days, and I had no idea. And I remember just being so frustrated. And it is very easy to get bad advice. So be careful with the advice you get. If you read a bunch of forums, you're going to see a ton of conflicting information. And the best thing you can do to avoid the bad advice is just start reading and kind of trying to figure out your own interests and then go from there. So if you're interested in web applications, you don't need to be reading about network penetration testing. You can focus on just web applications, and somebody else might say you need to know all of this networking information when that's just not the case. You can focus more on web applications or whatever it is that interests you. Maybe it is a bug bounty. Go out and read the activity and do things along that way. So it's going to be hard for you, especially as a beginner. It's very easy to get bad advice and to sift through what is good and what isn't. So this is kind of why it's hard in the beginning. So the mindset you're going to have is, look at me. I wasted, I think it was like $900 at the time I signed up for the OSCP in 60 days. Sure, I learned a lot. I failed the first time tremendously. My wife was super mad at me that I had spent a bunch of money on this OSCP course with knowing I knew nothing going into it, and I failed spectacularly. Don't get me wrong, I tried every day to figure it out, but I had got that bad advice and I had to figure out how to move on from that bad advice and then come back stronger. I could have just quit and said this is really hard. I wasted $900, but I didn't. I just had to say, how do I get through this, and then how do I come back stronger, and how do I get through whatever it is that I need to get through. And so you have to have that mentality of thinking this is going to be hard, but I can overcome it. So just know going in, hacking is hard. You're going to have days that you want to quit. Don't waste $1,000 like I did, and keep on moving forward and then overcome those hard obstacles. Okay, so what I wish I had done. So things I wish I had done different. So we know hacking is hard. I already shared a story with you about how I failed the OSCP spectacularly by taking some bad advice. So what do I wish I would have done differently? I wish I would have known that it was not about programming. One of the reasons I thought I could just ace the OSCP was because I came in with a programming background. I knew how to build websites, and I knew about backends and databases and things like that. So I thought, I'm going to be great. This is going to be wonderful. I have this programming background. It's going to be easy. That was not the case. It is not about programming. The mindset of programming does help. It does help to say, okay, if this is happening on a web application, what can I do here? But it's not about programming. And so I hear that sometimes you don't need to learn how to program, which is true to an extent. You don't need to learn how to program, but eventually you will need to learn the basics of programming. So if you know no programming and you're just now coming into cybersecurity, like if you want to be a network penetration tester, I would say the bar for programming is very low. If you want to be a bug bounty hunter, it's getting a little higher. You're going to need to know some JavaScript. You're going to need to know how backends work, things like that. But you don't need to be like a full stack web developer. You don't need to be a C++ programmer. You just don't need to know all this. You just need the basics of how to read code. So it's helpful, but cybersecurity does not revolve around programming. It revolves around how can I break this and then figuring it out. So that will really help you coming into it. Is just don't think programming is everything. It's going to be more about being curious and figuring out how to break something instead of knowing how to programming. But for those of you who are all about the programming, it will help, and you will need to know some programming eventually so you can read through some code. Okay, hacking is not about memorizing. You will never be able to memorize everything. This is going to be really, really important, especially if you do what I did and I thought, okay, I want to get a job. Well, what do I got to do? I need all of these certifications. Well, what do you do in the CompTIA certifications? A bunch of memorization. And I remember coming in, failed the OSCP, thought I need to start off easy. So Google what is some easy certifications, thinking I need certifications, and I started to chase the certifications, which is something that I think a lot of beginners do. Do not chase certifications. You need to learn outside of the certifications. Certifications should be a second thought. Once you're ready to get a job, then think about certifications. So certifications are not going to be the place where you get your training. I'll cover this in a little bit in this video, but I actually have videos completely dedicated to learning and how to learn and the learning paths. And if you're interested in those, I'll link those down in the description. But hacking is not about memorization. I remember when I was doing the CompTIA certifications, just having a stack of flashcards, and that's really what it was, flashcards. And I downloaded some apps on my phone and I memorized all those flashcards as well. And it really isn't about memorizing anything. It's how do I break this? So if you run into a problem, you can go, okay, I know that I can do something here, and then going out to Google and then Googling the syntax of something or how this exploit works. You don't need to memorize all the syntax. You don't need to memorize how the exploit works. You can always go back. If you go look at exploit DB, there are thousands of exploits. You will never be able to remember all of them. So it's not about memorizing. It's more about thinking, how can I break this? I remember there was something I could do here. Now I need to go Google and figure out what the syntax was, or how to pull off this exploit, or how to chain multiple exploits together, which is most likely what you're going to have to do. You're not going to be able to say, okay, I need this one exploit. It does happen, but usually it's I need this exploit, but then this software developer included this other software and it has an exploit as well. I need to chain these together. It's going to be how to think to get to the end goal, not necessarily just memorizing. So memorizing is not the way to go. You're not going to be able to memorize everything. You need to be thinking more along the lines of how do I exploit this, or I've seen this before, and then being able to Google to find your answers. So the next one, being curious is not enough. I hear a lot, and I have said it, and I am guilty of this, of saying one of the keys to thinking like a penetration tester or a bug bounty hunter is being curious. If there's a button and you click the button and it takes you to a new page or runs some function, we need to be thinking, how does this function work, or what does this function do? And we're curious about it. But it's not enough to just go, man, I wonder how this function works. You have to go out and try to figure out how the function works. If you were a programmer, how would you have written this code? How would you have written this function? Maybe you don't have access to the JavaScript, which is going to run the function. You need to be able to think, how would I have written this, and how can I exploit it? What kind of holes might there be in this specific function in this web application? So you can't just be curious and say, I wonder how this works. It's, I wonder how this works, and now I'm going to figure it out. You can't just be questioning things, which is something I've said and something I hear a lot, is just be curious. Question how it works. But it's not just to say, I wonder how this works, I'm going to question it. It's, I wonder how this works, now I'm going to figure it out, then I'm going to exploit its holes. So being curious is not enough. You need to be curious, but once you're curious, you got to figure out how it works and then how you exploit it. So being curious is helpful, but it is not going to be enough. Start reading the Hacktivity on HackerOne and Hack the Box walkthroughs. This is going to be really helpful. I remember when I was learning how to program, Code Wars was a really big thing. I'm not really sure if it's as big now as it was back when I was learning how to program, but Code Wars was a really big deal. And one of the things I loved about it was you could see how other people wrote their code to solve problems. That's one of the things I love about Hack the Box walkthroughs. They're online, they're on YouTube. You can go watch them and you can see how other people think and how they exploited a specific exploit, and not only how they exploited it, but how they found it. And a lot of times you'll be able to watch YouTube videos and people will talk through their methodologies and how they found something or what they were thinking. And that is really going to help you in developing your hacker mindset and how to think through finding exploits. It's going to be really helpful to read the walkthroughs, watch videos on walkthroughs on Hack the Box, but also if you read the Hacktivity, this is going to be a great place to just learn. So you're going to see a lot of exploits that you didn't know existed and you would have never thought to exploit because you just didn't know they were there. You can read about those specific exploits, and if you don't understand them, you can go research them. You can ask in a forum for somebody to explain it. There's just a lot of different ways to learn. So start reading. This is something I'm going to tell you, download the dictionary on your phone and just start reading. This is going to be really helpful, especially when you go shopping and you don't really want to be shopping and you're just sitting on the bench waiting for your wife, your girlfriend, or your boyfriend, or whoever it is. And while they're out shopping, you can be sitting there and you can be reading the Hacktivity. You can be watching walkthroughs. You can be learning. You can be doing stuff to get better all the time. And reading is going to be something that is really helpful for you. Make sure you understand what you are reading. So this is just kind of a little tip I want to throw out there. Sign up for TryHackMe. This video is not sponsored by TryHackMe or HackTheBox, but if they're watching, they should do that. And the reason I tell you to sign up for TryHackMe first is because they have easy learning paths. You're going to be able to learn the basic tools, the basic ports that are open, the basics of web fundamentals, and TryHackMe is very beginner friendly. I would recommend signing up for TryHackMe. Don't go for the OSCP. Bad idea. Don't sign up for the OSCP. Don't sign up for CompTIA. Don't sign up for any certifications or any of those courses or any certifications that are along those lines. You got a lot of free stuff here on YouTube that you can watch. You can watch IppSec and his walkthroughs. That's going to be extremely helpful for you. And you can go to TryHackMe and you're going to be able to learn a lot of the basics, all the way from just understanding how Windows functions, understanding Linux, and you can go through and learn the command lines, really all the way from the very beginning where you know absolutely nothing. TryHackMe is going to be your friend. So that was kind of just a bonus of what I wish I would have known. Don't go for certifications. Go to TryHackMe first. Then once you have done TryHackMe, that's when you move on to HackTheBox CTFs, and that's when IppSec's channel is going to be really, really helpful for you. He is going to be one of your best assets in learning penetration testing. So move on from TryHackMe to HackTheBox CTFs, and remember to read the walkthroughs. So let's go ahead and move on. Focus on one thing at a time. We jump around from one thing to another. Try everything you can think of, then move on. This is going to be really important because what happens is you'll run a port scan, you'll see all the ports that are open, and you're going to go, okay, port 21, can I log in? Port 80, let's see what it looks like. Port 8080, there's probably another application. And what you're going to do is you're going to want to open all of this stuff up and look at all of it really quickly, and you're going to want to attack each one just with the basic attacks to see if there's anything you can do that's going to be really easy for the quick win. And that might work for you once you're more advanced, but when you're new and you're a beginner, do one thing at a time. Say port 21, what's everything I can do with port 21? And if all of that fails, then move on. Don't be jumping around and trying to exploit multiple different things on multiple different ports and different times, or anything along those lines. Some people I know will like to have a bunch of tabs open on burp. I can't do that. If there's a bunch of tabs open, I want to look at all of them all at once and try exploiting everything, send the requests, see the responses, and I have to more focus what's one thing at a time, and that really helps me. So there are some really great hackers out there that can do multiple things all at the same time, and somehow they can keep it straight. I can't do that. So I like to tell beginners to not jump around. Focus on one exploit at a time, one port at a time, one function within a web application at a time, and then once you've exhausted everything and it didn't work, move on. And you're going to be thinking the same thing I thought as a beginner. Well, if it doesn't work and I spent an hour on port 21, I wasted my time. I wasted my time. And the answer is no, you really didn't waste your time, because in spending all of that time on port 21, you will start to ingrain your processes, how to think, what to do next, and you're going to learn all about that port. And even if it doesn't work, I'm sure you're going to read other things that you haven't seen before on port 21. So focus on one thing at a time, and know if it doesn't work, you didn't waste your time. You still learned a lot in the process. You developed your methodology a little bit further. Probably were able to add to your notes. You probably understand how it works a little bit better, and then you can move on to the next port, and you didn't miss anything, which is really important. There are times when I would do a CTF and I would be doing multiple different things at the same time, and I would pass over the actual exploit because I missed it. I was doing other things, and I would waste like 6 hours and be like, man, I can't figure this out. And then I would start over and I would focus on one thing at a time, and it'd take 10 minutes, and I would be able to find the exploit. So as a beginner, focus on one thing at a time. Okay, so we went from just a little bit on the slide to a lot, and we're going to break this down. So let's say we're attacking an expense tracker. Let's say you're an accountant or you have finance problems and you want to track your expenses. What are we going to think about an expense tracker? In your program, you're going to need to be able to create an expense. Number two, you're going to edit the expense. Number three, delete the expense. If you watched any of my Python programming course that I just put out, then you're going to see this is kind of how I think. And the second thing that comes to your mind is security. The first thing on a programmer's mind is not security. First thing on a programmer's mind is, here's the project, create an expense tracker. What do I need to be able to do with an expense tracker? I need to be able to create an expense. I need to be able to edit the expense. I need to be able to delete the expense. I need to be able to store the expense. So maybe I need a backend. Maybe I need a database. And that's how they think. You're not thinking, create an expense. Okay, well, if I have user number one, he's going to create an expense under user number one. You're not thinking IDOR. You're not thinking, how can I keep this person from editing an expense of somebody else or deleting an expense? You're not thinking of these types of things. Usually you're thinking, how can I solve the problem? So if you want to understand how something works, think, how would a programmer have done this? And then what security flaws might they have overlooked? So we look at the components. So then we look at, what does it do? Well, what does the application do? It creates expenses so that we can track them. What are the components of the application? Those are going to be right here, which we already talked about. And then it's, how can I modify the request? Can I get into somebody else's info? Can I get into another user's info? Can I log in as another user? Can I delete another user? Maybe I'm not able to create an expense as another user. Maybe I'm able to edit an expense of another user. Maybe when I go to delete my account, I can delete another's account. Sometimes you'll be able to delete an account and it'll be like, we're going to email you to see if you'd like to actually delete your account. And you click delete account and you look at the request and burp, and it'll say it's sending it to whatever user, and you can send it to your own email and you can verify it. You can still delete the account. Even though the email was supposed to go somewhere else, you can send it to yourself. And maybe there's something like this that the programmer overlooked. And then maybe I can edit a past expense. Maybe I can use it to reach another user's expense. There's lots of ways to get around this. And maybe you can delete an expense. Maybe you don't want to just delete a user. You want to delete an expense off of another user. And you can play with all of these functions and see what you can do with it. So when you're thinking about how a hacker thinks, we're doing one thing at a time. So I listed off a lot of stuff here, but it's, how does it function? So when we look at this, let's say we're hacking an expense tracker. That's what we're after. How would a programmer have created this? This is where kind of the programming is going to come into play. How would they have created this? And then what is it that they might have overlooked? So here's some questions that you should be asking yourself in the function of the program. They made an expense tracker. You have to be able to edit it. You have to be able to store it. You're probably going to have a back end. You're going to be able to delete. You're going to be able to edit. You're going to be able to create a new expense. So how can we leverage all of the things that the programmer put together so that we can exploit it? This is how you're going to have to think. You're going to have to be thinking in this way. It's going to be, what is everything this piece of software is designed to do, and then how does it work, and then how can I exploit it? You have to understand how it works in order to understand how to exploit it. And you can just start playing with the requests. And remember, all the way back at the top, one of the things about an ethical hacker is failure is not an issue. So if we move down to the last slide, an ethical hacker is an innovator. In the process of breaking things down, we see the big picture. A hacking cannot be learned through a lecture. And I put a hyphen in there, it's trial and error. So when you come back to this slide, how do we know if we can modify a request? How do we know if we can get another user's info? Well, we're going to have to do trial and error. And you're going to fail like 99.9% of the time. But when it does work, then you have that goal right there met. You were able to do it. And it's not a question right here, can I break into the system? But how long until I break into the system? You have to know that you could fail for a couple of days or a couple of weeks, and maybe your task is you have a month to hack this one specific company that you've been hired to do a penetration test for, and you have this entire month. You may fail for 3 weeks, and it's going to be a lot of error, but it's trial and error, and eventually you could get in. So maybe they're secure, maybe they're not, but it's not a can I break into this system, but how long until I break into this system? You need to be thinking, there's a way in, how do I find it? It's a matter of time before I accomplish my goals. That's really going to help you in your mindset. Even if you're new and you're learning penetration testing, it's a matter of time until you're there, until you're a penetration tester. It's just a matter of time until you're there and you're a bug bounty hunter. You have to be thinking long term. It's not, can I break into this system, but how long till I break into this system? It's not, can I be a penetration tester? It's how long until I am a penetration tester. And the same thing with bug bounty hunting. So we kind of skipped over this one right here. Finding holes in a system no one else has. Solving ambiguous problems. So this is kind of the innovator. It's looking for things that no one else has found. So this was kind of my thoughts on helping you start to think like a penetration tester or a bug bounty hunter. If you have anything to add to this video, I would love to hear your thoughts down in the comments of what is helping you become a bug bounty hunter or a penetration tester. What really helped you develop that hacker mindset? Thanks for watching.